to come and join the staff at Liberty Bible College and teach in the college and also be an associate pastor. And there were several associate pastors, Bill Stamp, Bill Cathy, Curtis Foreman, and Bob Bishop, and myself. And so we arrived in January to start teaching in that semester. And previous to that, sometime late in 1973, Brother Ken had spoken in Birmingham at a Full Gospel Businessmen's meeting, and several people had come to him and asked him, was it possible to establish a church in Birmingham like Liberty Church in Pensacola? And so Brother Ken said, well, we'll see what God does, but what I'll do is I will send people on my staff up on a weekly basis and speak, and we'll see where that goes. And so I was the newest member of the staff, so I was the last on the rotation. And so when my time came, actually Bob Bishop had expressed an interest in coming and being the pastor. And so Brother Ken asked me to come with Bob. And Bob and I, on the way up here, we discussed it. And Bob said, John, I want you to be ready to preach in case God shows me that I'm not the person for this location. And so I believe that we spent the night with Walter and Martha Henderson, who were gracious hosts. And so either that Saturday night or early Sunday morning, Bob came to me and said, you're on. You're going to preach this morning. And so we met in some school building. I think Farrell will tell you where that was. But I remember two things. When I left Pensacola to come up here, my wife was 7 months pregnant with our third child. And the last thing she said is, don't come back and tell me we're moving to Birmingham. Before I spoke that morning, God spoke to my heart and said, this is your location. I want you to come and establish a church in Birmingham. And so, I don't know, we went back and Brother Ken came up and I was recognized. We shortly after that moved into the Admiral Benbow Inn, and we were having services. And the amazing thing is that we were supposed to vacate the room by 12 o'clock. And the Birmingham Stallions, the World League football team that was in Birmingham at the time, they would come in and have a meeting after we left. And you know how charismatic services are. Sometimes we were not through by 12 o'clock. But just a side note is I would walk past those big guys, look up to them, and they were monsters compared to me. Actually, I was passing by one of my future elders in Norman, Oklahoma, Ed Foster, who was a great football player at the University of Oklahoma. He was also a professional football player and played with the Birmingham Stallions. And later on, we crossed paths, and I was his pastor in Norman, a great family, and just let you know about that. But anyway, we began to pray about a location. And somebody told me that there was a church in Bluff Park for sale, Bluff Park Baptist Church. They were in a building program. And so I somehow got the number. I called the pastor and I said, do you have a church building for sale? And he said, we really do. In fact, he said, the listing ran out today. And I said, well, and he said, I'm going to relist it Monday. I said, well, save our name, because if you let the listing company know that we've talked to you and it wasn't listed with them, we can save the cost of a commission. And so he did that, but I wanted to make an appointment. And so Farrell and Walter Henderson and Ron McWhorter and Charles Deason and several of the elders they went with us, and we looked at the facility. We went home and we all got together and prayed, and we had a unanimous agreement that the Spirit of God was in this, and so we were to go and purchase Bluff Park. I remember they were really desperate to sell it because they were moving to the new facilities and they needed the money. And I can't remember if the price was $65,000 or $85,000, but it was something like that. So I called the pastor and I said, we're going to accept your price. We want to buy your facility. And I made an appointment. I think it was on a Friday afternoon at 2 or 3 o'clock. How many of you know that when you're on God's business, the devil tries to get in the way and hinder what you're trying to accomplish? As I was driving to that meeting, my car broke down. I literally had to hitchhike my way up to Bluff Park Baptist Church. I got there about 10 minutes late. The pastor was there, all of his board was there, and their attorney was there. I guess the attorney had written up the contract. And so we looked at the contract, and I said, okay, I'm ready to sign, and I'm ready to give you $1,000 earnest money. The attorney looked at the pastor and said, it's customary for a purchaser to put 10% of the purchase price down as earnest money. I spoke up and I said, it's legal and binding if we give you $1, but in good faith, we're going to give you $1,000. And then God showed up, and the pastor looked at his board and looked at his attorney. He had never met me before. He said, I believe that this is a man of God, and I think we should accept his terms. So we signed the contract, we wrote the check for $1,000. Then I started looking for a bank to finance it. Well, I went by the first bank that I passed, and I went in, and I asked to speak to the president. I don't know if he's the branch manager or the president, but I went in, he said, what can I do for you? I said, well, first of all, I'm looking for a bank that's big enough to do business with God. He looked at me and he said, you've got my attention. And so I told him we were a new church plant from Liberty, and that we had just signed a contract and we needed some financing. He informed me that they don't make loans to people that don't have their checking account at their bank. Well, in the divine, I have no idea, but in the divine providence of God, not only did we have our checking account with that bank, but also with that branch. And God gave us favor, and I asked him if he would let us get the financing, a 15-year note, and interest only for the first 6 months. Well, he did better than that. He let us have interest only for the first year. And then they amortized the payments for 15 years, and Liberty paid it off, I think, in the first 8 years. Is that right, Farrell? One other thing I want to say about the beginning of Liberty Church. We started very early in the beginning. God showed me that if I would get involved in what he was doing outside the walls of Liberty, he would get involved with what we were doing inside the walls of Liberty. And so we established the principle that 10% of all the income, not only did we expect the people to tithe, and we practiced that, but as a church, we would practice that. And so we started early on with a heart for missions. Let me say it is a privilege, an honor, and a joy to come back and be here with you on this 40th anniversary and just marvel at the great things that God has done. God bless you.